So basically, if users can't tell what matters, then everything matters on the screen. And that is one of the fastest ways to kill activation, is when you make everything feel important. And what they don't need, what users don't need more of are features, they need a hierarchy. And so you really need someone with that lens to look at this and say, okay, this is like what actually they should be focused on. Don't have the first step be set up your profile and in your avatar picture and your color schema. Nobody cares. And once they've spent time doing that, they've moved on to the next task. Their boss has pinged them to do something. They have forgotten about your product and they're not actually diving into the platform. Yeah.
She's an award-winning CMO. I met her recently on various channels. She reached out to me. I'm so glad that she reached out to me. She's been working with many SaaS companies, primarily equipping founders, GTM leaders, and very early stage marketing teams with really practical step-by-step guidance. She's built an amazing framework called the GTM Audit framework, so I'm going to talk about that today. We'll essentially deep dive into how to audit your GTM, how to understand your GTM engine for growth. She specializes in figuring out hidden bottlenecks, friction issues that happen, all the way from messaging to conversion. So you can call that as a conversion optimization framework in a sense. And we'll essentially see how these translate into actions that the founders, the growth leaders can take. So with that said, welcome Marlena. Happy to host you. And I'm sure our audience are going to love this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am the co-founder of the company Advice. We help startups and SaaS companies with everything that they need from marketing to product design and ensure that those two sides of the house are aligned. It's a little bit of an unusual agency model. We don't just come in and redesign logos and create marketing collateral, though that is a component of it. What we do is we make sure that the two sides are in lockstep, because we see a lot of cross-functional needs that the two sides need in order for you to have a seamless product experience, narrative, and go-to-market orchestration.
So maybe before we jump in, and we're sure we're going to deep dive a lot into it, Marina, could you maybe share a little bit about your background, your own personal background, and how you got into maybe the world of GTM and probably even more closer to the world of GTM audits? How did you get
Yeah.
started in this particular space? I'm sure many of our listeners, especially if they are a solopreneurs, if I'm saying that right, our
Yeah.
growth advisors, they would probably take inspiration from your journey itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think like a lot of college students, I was on a particular track and it went a little bit in a different direction. I was on the law school track, but I ended up getting a corporate job in marketing. And so I learned from a Fortune 100 company how that marketing motion worked. And I was really spearheading the turnkey department. So we were spinning out a lot of quick campaigns and marketing frameworks in a turnkey way that felt personalized and effective for the smaller companies that we were working with. That allowed me to learn really systems thinking. And this was something that I really leaned into and I realized was a strength of mine. So really applying more of an engineering mindset to a lot of this type of work. I think there might be like a misnomer that marketing is like the arts and crafts side of the house, and it's really not. I think effective marketing is an arts and science. After joining my first startup and that startup bug bit me, I actually enjoyed the engineering side so much that I actually went and obtained a master's in engineering. So after that, I began to take on more bigger roles, marketing roles at more complex organizations in insurtech and health tech, and started building out really complicated go-to-market frameworks and motions that allowed us to disseminate very complex engineering concepts and products that were produced by engineers and converting them into market speak and finding the right channels to reach our target buyers and our target users. So with multi-user platforms, new category creation, there was a lot of opportunity for me to see, experiment, and learn how to do this. And since then, I've spun out the company Advice with my partner, Lubna, who handles the product side of the house. And we are now utilizing this framework in assisting other companies.
Wonderful. Do you want to share maybe, some good, bad, or failure experiences that essentially got you into this particular space?
Yeah, I think I am someone who really enjoys picking up the pieces after something doesn't work or it breaks. And
Well,
I like to figure out how to put it back together, right? It's kind of like that engineering mindset, I think. So, like, I like to take it apart and then put it back together. We've had some interesting experiences with our clients where unwittingly we ended up kind of like in the process of building who their company was, creating situations where they started to ask themselves, are we even building the right thing? We don't even know who we're building it for. We just spent a whole year with VC money building something and we are totally on the wrong track. And so we actually had an experience where after we did the messaging, marketing, rebranding, the questions we were asking them were making them so uncomfortable that they decided to pivot. So, they were thankful that they were able to spot this early on before continuing to burn investor cash. However, we were a little bit bummed out because we were really excited to bring this to market and all this good work that we did together to that date. But then luckily enough, they did bring us back in and we were able to assist them with some user research so that we could actually uncover those nuggets of who are they going for? What do those people actually need? I think they found themselves in like a familiar common trap where they were kind of like vibing on this idea and they were coding something up and they were spinning out stuff and it looked cool and it sounded cool. But at the end of the day, nobody asked for it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very familiar. I come from a very engineering product background, and we cook up things in our heads. We think that this could be potentially the problem, that the customers might have, and you start building the solution, and we only talk about the solution and not really about the problem. So we had a podcast guest about three podcasts back, and he came from a psychologist background. And it's funny. I think some of the listeners might even be able to go connect to these dots here. He was advising an airline company about how to sell tickets at a higher price point because they were running in losses, and they're figuring out what can even smaller nickel and dime kind of things that can do that they can do this. So he advised them to add a cup holder in on these things, and the airline industry said that's too expensive. And then he advised them to add a phone holder. Say premium seats get phone holder, not just more leg room, but a phone holder, and or keep their phone or even a tablet. And they experiment with that, and they were able to get $100 more, on an average per ticket than the one they got earlier. So I think these experiments about the psychology helps, and sometimes people don't understand that things that Marlena, you and your kin, if I can call it, would do to help in looking at the buyer journey, looking at the needs of that particular buyer would have a definitive impact on the price points and all of that. So sorry, it's monologue from my side, but I want to jump into thanks for sharing that particular story. I'm sure that that's very interesting, from the audience standpoint. Could you get a little more into what you do when you mention about the GTM growth audit? What is a GTM growth audit? Maybe
Yeah,
explain to
absolutely.
us almost in layman terms. We have a lot of founders and growth leaders who listen to this. How is this relevant to them?
Yeah, so again, we look at this in terms of three layers: the product experience, the website narrative, and the conversion function. And then the third layer are your marketing loops and your go to market orchestration. So let's start with the product experience. We want to know, do your users understand the core value of your product within their first session? If they don't, they're probably going to disappear. And we look at things like onboarding. Does it feel effortless? Does it guide them to an aha moment? Okay, this is how this works. This is cool. And are they discovering features intuitively rather than by accident? We definitely want to make sure that your key workflows require minimal explanation, minimal support. Like they should be able to get in there and get the hang of it. And your activation point needs to be really reliably predicted and improved upon so that you can continue to mimic these motions and scale and grow. Then let's step to the website narrative layer. So does your homepage clearly communicate what the product does and for who? Like, can your visitors self-identify whether the product is a fit for them? Does it reinforce the product experience rather than contradicting it? So are they getting one experience on the website and then they get into the product and something totally different? And we want to make sure that your messaging expresses a clear and differentiated position. So, this is a really interesting time now. There's a lot of material that's being generated via LLMs, ChatGPT, a lot of AI stuff. And what we're noticing from our side of the coin is that it's really this commoditization of utilizing these tools is making everyone kind of sound the same. And so I think even though this is a really useful tool and we love using it as well, I think you still really need to see a human in the loop to assist with this narrative and your points of differentiation, because otherwise everybody is going to be saying the same things. And we're already seeing this. Another kind of funny thing is one tagline that for me screams ChatGPT is turning clarity into chaos. I don't know why ChatGPT loves this tagline, but I see it everywhere. I see it across industries. I've seen it on multiple booths at trade shows. It's a telltale sign that you just generated something really quickly. You didn't put in like the really thoughtful prompts to get the output that would truly differentiate you. And now guess what? You're going to show up at your next trade show and your booth is going to say the same thing that the rest of the people in your aisle are going to say. And that's really embarrassing. So I think it's really important to still, again, keep that human in the loop to make sure that, yeah, we're definitely speeding up the process of content generation, but that it's not just slop that says nothing at the end of the day. And then the third layer are your marketing loops. So do you have an active marketing loop, or are you just doing one-off campaigns? We see a ton of companies who just do one-off campaigns and then they might get like an artificial lift or bump, but
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to see a repetitive motion that you can then continue to scale from and learn from. So we want to make sure your content is really meaningfully supporting the activation and retention side. We want to make sure that you have a clear ICP that's driving your go-to-market decisions. This is another area that we often see in our audits and diagnostic part of our sessions, is that everybody has a different ICP in mind on the team itself. And
Mhm.
when product marketing and sales aren't using the same narrative, you're going to create a lot of confusion in the marketplace. You're going to dilute the narrative and you're going to, again, create false promises, false expectations, and you're just going to continue to build friction points that are going to on your growth ultimately.
Got it. So let me understand this a little more. So you mentioned three things. One is, and correct me if I got this right. So you said three layers. The first layer is the product layer.
Mm-hmm.
Is your time to value. Time to value. Are able to get the users to experience the value as fast as possible, and what's the bottlenecks within, what's the friction within. The second layer you mentioned is about the marketing website. Is the marketing website telling a different story than your product? Meaning, is the product experience very different than what's been promised on the marketing? And I think
Mm-hmm.
the third area you mentioned primarily about referrals and retention, and to get that, marketing loops would need to be created. So you mentioned more about can you get repeat customers or referral customers through those marketing loops. Would that
Mm-hmm.
be would that be the right three layers?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Maybe could you share some examples on maybe one, each of the layers, maybe a little more. Let's start with the first one, which is the product activation or onboarding layer.
Yeah,
In your audits, Marlena, what have you seen? I'm sure you might have seen, really good, bad onboarding experiences.
definitely.
Share some insights towards that a little bit.
Yeah, or no onboarding experiences,
Or
funnily
no,
enough.
yeah,
So, yeah, so basically, if users can't tell what matters, then everything matters on the screen. And that is one of the fastest ways to kill activation is when you make everything feel important. And what users don't need more of are features, they need a hierarchy. And so you really need someone with that lens to look at this and say, okay, this is like what actually they should be focused on. Don't have the first step be set up your profile and then your avatar picture and your color schema. Nobody cares. And once they've spent time doing that, they've moved on to the next task. Their boss has pinged them to do something. They have forgotten about your product and they're not actually diving into the platform. The other thing is, so like activation in our mind is a systems problem, not just a UX problem. So this is like fixing onboarding is often done in isolation by teams, but in reality, it depends on your narrative alignment across product, website, and go to market. And so instead of redesigning screens, which is usually everyone's first instincts, it's you really should look at like what is the upstream narrative? Is there misalignment there between that and then like the user experience? And then I kind of touched on this as well, like having a predictable activation. So this is a maturity
Yeah, maybe if
signal.
I can intervene, could you maybe define a little more about what do you mean by systems problem rather than not just a product? What do you mean by
Yeah. So by systems problem, I mean, I'm talking about these multiple layers working together in concert. So ensuring that your website narrative is correct, that you're converting the right folks, and that your marketing loops are all working in concert to make sure that the right folks are coming in the door, the right users are actually using the platform, you're getting the right feedback, as opposed to just thinking about this in like a singular, this screen doesn't work for some reason.
So the end-to-end experience all the way till maybe the aha moment or the first value experience moment.
I'll give you another example. Like my partner, she'll often be, she'll be pulled in and they'll be like, "Oh, we have an issue with onboarding. Can you look at onboarding, give us your recommendations?" And she can't just look at it in this tiny, narrow scope. She'll start asking other questions like, "Well, what's the happy path? What's the entire user journey look like? Where are these users coming from? What are they being promised?" And if they can't answer those questions, that's where you have to start looking and pointing attention to, not that onboarding screen.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So the onboarding screen, even though it might be central, something precedes that, which is the narrative. Why someone came in. So if your partner Lubna is trying to understand, she gets pulled in. She'll typically say, "Hey, tell me what's your promise to the customer. What's the
Hmm.
narrative that's being referred on the marketing website? What's the incentive? Is that right? What's the incentive for them to even start the onboarding?" Uh,
Absolutely. And
and that's probably
plus and you can add in the added complicated layer of you have a different user persona. Your user persona is probably going to be different than your buyer persona. So the promises that are being made to the buyer who signed the check and has now said to this company, you have to start using this product, there could be misalignment there too. The user might be like, well, what the hell is this? Or I'm in this and it's not doing the things that you told us it was going to. So there's a lot of points of communication there you got to take a look at
yeah.
and finesse.
Yeah, and in your experience for this particular layer, which is maybe all the way from sign up to the aha moment, what are the typical, you know, common issues that you've seen across your customer bases? Where do people go wrong? Why do people go wrong?
Well, I think
Maybe,
you
go ahead.
know,
Sorry.
obviously a lot of these product solutions, software, they're being built by engineers, and engineers are really great at building and then telling you what they built. And so they can list off all of the features. But what they have a tough time doing is translating that to benefits. What are the benefits of these features? So instead of, a classic example is like the iPhone. Like iPhone doesn't say we have this many pixels and our camera lens is the best. Da, 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 da. They say you can capture the moments that matter and remember them forever. I'm paraphrasing, but the idea is in the consumer's mind, you want to capture the moments and take pictures, right? Like you're not necessarily computing, oh, this level of pixels is going to give me like a superior outcome. You need to really tie that together for them and really spell out this is the benefit of these sets of features. And we see a lot of founders, particularly technical founders, get very hung up on this and insist on the website being a brochure, a feature brochure, and that does not move the needle. It simply does not.
Right. Okay. So I think you mentioned about two things. One is the website narrative. Typically, for maybe a first-time founder or a technical founder, it becomes like a brochure feature list, and that's a no-go. So that's a common practice that you've seen across the board. The second
Yeah.
practice, engineers who build onboarding experiences, they show the same thing there. They list all the features and they list the pixels, but not the capture the moment kind of an example.
Hmm.
Could you maybe elevate this? Let's say if you were to go and do an audit to a company like this, it's going to be a hard change for them to go from what you're talking the value of benefits and value. They are
Hmm.
talking features. How do you bridge that
Hmm.
gap as part of your GTM growth audits? I mean, is that something that you do as part of the audits?
That's part of the magic that happens in my brain. So that's where I come in, and I marry, that marketing experience, the engineering experience, the education I've obtained throughout my career, and that's where I am just this human translator, I guess, of I hear your feature list and I can translate that into benefits market facing language.
Okay. So is there a framework that you typically apply? Is there a framework wherein you ask a certain series of questions to be able to go understand the benefits? Could you maybe share an example? Not necessarily, take a case of your customer. If you're willing, that's fine. But could you share some examples where they were just dumping these features and all the kitchen sink, and we asked a series of questions, and this is what you got from it, and the value for that was not realized until you went through this particular framework that you built.
Yeah, it's multi-step process where we combine insights from user interviews, live users. We also can speak to agnostic third-party folks, just, theoretically what they would be looking for, who are not current customers. We look at user behavior and analytics inside the platform.
Right?
So if we see if somebody is, stuck on a certain workflow or never advances after a particular click, we
So
we
what
want
happens to it?
we will take a look at that, and then we'll synthesize, what the founders are saying, what the team is saying. 9.9 out of 10 times we get a completely different narrative between what the founder CEO is saying is the narrative, the head of sales, the technical lead, clinical lead if it's a health tech platform. These narratives are never aligned, and that right there tells us that there needs to be a little bit of rework done here.
Got it.
One final component to mention is, I'm talking a lot about early stage companies who are kind of figuring out their way, but we also do work with some legacy companies. And what we've seen there is often they over index on updating the software, which is, great, but then the marketing has been neglected. And so the website is 10 years out of date and it no longer aligns at all with the product experiences. So, I kind of alluded before to early stage companies maybe over promising in their marketing. I think a lot of legacy companies are under promising,
Got it.
and their narrative actually has not caught up with the prowess of their current live product. And so we often come in and kind of do like a reverse thing there. And so we'll sit down with the product, learn all about it, get the narrative, and then update the materials accordingly. So that's a common case that marketing just is like the neglected, redheaded stepchild, if you will.
I think Marlena, you're absolutely right. So we've also seen in our business. I mean, we don't have, they're not a GTM audit. They're a product company looking at growth intelligence across the board. And when we see this, we seeing like really two trends. The first one is, and I'm thankful of AI, being able to kind of switch that gap a little bit. Typical marketing experience, you'll say some videos or some things out there, but these days I'm starting to see, you can have interactive demos, and the values
Mm-hmm.
of the demos, these interactive demos are pretty much the current version of your product, and the demos are there.
Mm-hmm.
The product goes out of sync, the demos will also mention that they're out of sync, and then that
Mm-hmm.
forces them to go and update the demo, or if not, they will essentially capture and take it to your product and put the interactive demo in the product and embed that into your marketing website. So thankful of that particular, the disparity between the marketing website and the product is, they're slowly coming together.
Mm-hmm.
These are common examples where Calendly, they don't have a marketing website and a product separate. It's the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Linear, the marketing website and the product, they're not separate. It's the same. So slowly but surely, SaaS companies are coming up with it. But you're absolutely right. This is not a wide trend across all the industries.
Right, right.
Let me jump into the second layer.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit about the website. When you mentioned about the narratives of the website, promises there, the over or the under promises there, whoever they might be, that does not translate to the product. And let me ask you maybe two questions to this. The people who are working on the product are typically different than the people who are working in the marketing website, right? Is that typically that what you see, correct?
Definitely, yes.
So how do you bring the, product has to change to get the same narrative as the marketing website, but as part of your audit, you say your marketing website also has to change, right? So
Hmm.
and essentially drawing the, you have to essentially say that, hey, let's agree upon that this is your messaging and this is your positioning, and then let's translate that to both marketing and product. Could you maybe share some examples of, uh, you know, um, the disparity between these narratives and maybe top problems or top issues that you see in why the marketing team structures the way they structure it versus how the product was structured.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, I think what's important to think about is that if the website promises one thing and the product experience delivers another, users don't blame the website. They blame themselves. They hesitate, they drop off, they support your burden, they burden your support system. And so the confusion always lands in the user, and that's not what anybody wants. You put a lot of effort into bringing that user in, and now they're confused and they're leaving. So I think what's important to think about is like a website that's like where friction is often self-inflicted. It's and what we try to get folks to think about is it should be treated as a decision engine. And by that I mean a good website doesn't convince everyone. It helps the right people say yes and the wrong people say no. That's what you want. And so instead of saying all of the things and using it as like a feature brochure set and, treating it as like a pet project by the founder or whoever is managing it, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot and create this confusion and lose users. So it's about getting really specific. It's about saying less, frankly, and showing more. Generic messaging we see often when folks are like, well, if we say this, it might alienate this audience or that audience. Generic messaging always feels safe internally, but it will create hesitation externally. And then again, that hesitation is more friction. So these are like the friction points that we're trying to kill with our audit. Again, we're just trying to get the right people to say yes quickly and the wrong people to say no quickly and move them into the funnel.
So maybe if you could share some examples about, sometimes it helps to go tie that with an example. I think you have a wonderful framework about how the narrative should be. What comes first and all of that. Is it possible for you to maybe take one example, maybe even a public example that you may not necessarily have? They may not be your clientele yet, but where you
Mm-hmm.
see either the disparity being happening or the cohesion happening properly.
I think like the more generic example that I'll share is that I alluded to all of the different team members having a different narrative. They all also have a different ICP in mind. And so what we see over and over again is 10 ICPs. Yes, sure, there could be potentially 10,
Okay.
even five. But if you don't write the website for one, at least while you're starting off, you're again going to shoot yourself in the foot. If you're a more enterprise company and you can afford to have the use cases and the case studies to back yourself up, and you're a little bit more mature and you have a full team that's supporting you on this, yes, of course you can have a full enterprise website that talks, to all of the different stakeholders and how the product supports their particular goals or needs. But we usually try to tailor it down to like one, two, and like a tertiary ICP. And that really helps tailor the messaging and strip out the fat, strip out all of the excess language, and we try to make it very clear, very succinct, because that is what will generate the cleanest, clearest data for you so that you know whether or not you're going after the right person, the right target market.
So
So you
maybe
just
let
can't
me
be everything for everyone, essentially, is
got
what
it.
I'm trying to
Let
say.
me have some clarifying questions. So many of our many of our listeners are either founders. A lot of them are early stage founders, 100,000 plus of them. Uh, what advice do you give them to, you mentioned you essentially gave one advice, right now, which is instead of targeting multiple ICPs, start by targeting one ICP.
Mm-hmm.
Could you define a little bit about what is an ICP in this case? Is it the buyer who you are
Mm-hmm.
targeting the website to
Yes.
be, or is it the
Yes.
user who
No,
would
it's the buyer.
the
It's
buyer?
the buyer. We have this conversation a lot. The user can absolutely be supported with supporting collateral. You can develop collateral for them, but you need the buyer to buy. It's really simple. And so we often have these dialogues with our founders, and they, like I said, want to talk to everyone. And if your end user is a technical engineer,
Hmm.
they are going to be supported best with strong documentation and use cases. They're not going to be persuaded by marketing language on a website. Their boss or their CEO, they're the ones who are evaluating and
Got it.
deciding whether or not to have that next step and that next conversation with you because of your marketing website. So there are ways to support additional folks in the ecosystem throughout, by strategically placing certain collateral within the website or within your marketing loop, but you cannot have it talk to everyone on the homepage, or
Got it.
you'll just lose everyone.
And have you seen, regardless of whether it is a product-led company or a sales-led company, the ICP is usually targeting the buyer. So would you advise, your
Yeah,
prospect, if they're a
I think
product-led company, would you do it the other way around or no?
Yeah, that's a good point. In PLG, certainly I guess it depends on the industry and whether that user has buy-in to purchase the product. Like if it's an enterprise solution, that's generally who we work with. We're in the B2B space, so
Got
that is
it.
the lens that I use. And so whether they are allowed to make that decision without leadership buy-in, that would sway how we would approach this.
Got it. Makes sense. So I think what you're saying is if you're a self-serve product-led company, and if potentially in the case is the user is the buyer, still the framework will hold good because you're targeting the buyer. In this case, the buyer is also the user. Voila, it's good. But if they are different, you still target for the buyers. Okay, that.
Definitely. But yeah. And the benefits to the buyers, if they're a good buyer, the benefits are how their team is going to be better, smarter, more effective by utilizing this. So it's not like we're removing them from the story at all. It's just that it's being packaged through the buyer lens.
Got it. I think your point is that the decision maker and the person who holds the budget is the buyer.
Hmm.
He needs to know whether it's a good buy or not. So I think that's very appropriate. Let me jump into the last layer that you had mentioned about the growth loops, the marketing loops. Could you share maybe
Yeah.
some thoughts of what these are and how these are generally done, and what do you see out there are problematic
Yeah.
conceptions or issues out there?
Yeah, definitely. So with your first layer product experience, that's where friction hides in plain sight. With your second layer, your website narrative, that's where I said your friction is often self-inflicted. And the third layer in your marketing loops, this is where friction compounds. So, one-time campaigns, in our opinion, hide broken systems, can create temporary spikes, but loops actually expose friction because they're on repeat. And so when a loop breaks or something is not being responsive, then something more structural is wrong. So campaigns can make you feel very busy and you're running from one thing to the next, but loops actually tell you whether your system is working. And so
Got it.
by that we mean, like, do you have like a right nurture system in place? Are the users being pinged appropriately as they're immersed in the product? Are they being pinged at the correct rate? Are they being shared content that allows them to succeed? So content that doesn't support their active use of the product is fluff. It's decorative. I'm not a proponent of just emailing for the sake of emailing ever.
Mhm.
In my mind, if content is not helping your user succeed, it's not a growth asset. So you're wasting your time. And the highest leverage content really will help you reduce friction during your onboarding, activation, and an expansion, because then your user actually knows, like, understands the value and they're excited and they're in it. And I guess like the third point I would make about that is similarly to what I was saying, that the company, that different team members will start talking about the company differently. This happens as the companies grow, right? The teams slowly start to develop different stories about the product, and that drift really introduces friction all across the ecosphere. So this slows things down again, but like people can't really tell, they don't really know why or what, or they can't pinpoint what the problem is. And it's usually, you usually need like a third party or just like an agnostic person. It could be someone like us at the company advice. It could be a board member. It could be an advisor, someone that sits down and kind of forces you guys to go through this process and pinpoint where is it that you are misaligned.
Got it. So maybe let me take maybe two questions to get some clarifying, to clarify what you just said. My first question to you would be, do you see out there that the companies that you advise to, do they use marketing as a channel to develop loops, the growth loops, or do they use product as a way to drive the growth loops? Let me ask this question. So in my mind, and maybe that's where you can clarify, let's say blogs, and blogs are, connecting to another blog, so connecting to another content, which then leads into product. So that's a marketing loop, you know, compounding to ultimately leading to the value, which can be the product. Or do you see the other way around, that someone is logging into the product and then they share the product or the screen or the widget to somebody else, and then they like it, and then they sign up to the product? So do you see a trend that's happening out there, which is a marketing loop, sure enough can drive traffic, but I'm not sure whether it can drive product engagement? Or do you see both of them to be happening simultaneously with customers that you advise? What do you see out there, and which one is what you would recommend to our
Yeah,
listeners?
my recommendation is that the both are working in concert and always in lockstep, that you don't have products sending emails without marketing knowing and vice versa. No, no, no. And you need to be saying the same things. That is your marketing. And with the companies that are doing it best, they are doing that. The ones that are not doing it well, and the ones that we come in and kind of like help fix things, they basically send like a product notification email that's like unbranded and weird and kind of looks spammy and isn't very enticing, and it's just kind of like alerting the user about, I don't know, a token created or something like that. There's so many missed opportunities there for these customer touch points to get them actually engaged and excited about your brand.
You're so right with that. So I think, product and marketing needs to really work together, but that's not just at the loop level.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a funny scenario, and I want to pick your brains on that a little bit. So we were recently working with and had a conversation with customer success teams who were in charge of driving engagement, driving product adoption, and they built their own workflow mechanism that, hey, if the journey of a customer is here and they are not using this particular feature, let me send an email to them. And they built a massive system, with no branding, nothing at all. The emails were landing initially into spam. They figured out how to not land them into spam. And then nobody was clicking into them, nobody was opening them. And they
Mm-hmm.
thought they were doing a wonderful thing by trying to intervene
Mm-hmm.
at the right time to say that, hey, we want to save you from going dormant. So we want to get you to say, hey, you already configured it, but you're not using it. I think, your advice probably applies way beyond it, which is not just the product and the marketing coming together, product, marketing, sales, and customer success coming together on that growth. Maybe take a quick moment about that, and we will jump into the next section. What do you think about that? Have you seen that happen?
Yeah,
Have you
absolutely.
seen
I think,
people
what
working together?
we've seen a lot of friction in this area, but we've also seen it working well where there's, on a systemic level, you have systems talking to each other. So marketing knows when somebody's gone dormant. Marketing knows when someone has performed a certain action, desirable action. Marketing knows when somebody hasn't performed a certain desirable action. And then they can create the systems within their CRMs where all of this customer information already lives, and you already have all the beautifully branded templated emails ready to go, and you can send out the appropriate pings to those customers or users and have marketing own it, because really effectively, as long as like the KPIs are aligned cross functionally, it is a metric that marketing would probably love to keep an eye on, like what is.
So your advice is aligned early and aligned well on that one. So any last words on how do anyone reach out to you? If they want to conduct an audit
Yeah.
and Lubna, how can they reach out to you? Where should they
So
go?
we built a special growth friction finding audit for Thrivecast listeners. You can find it on our website. Yes, it's thecompanyadvice.com. We'll also put it in the show notes for this podcast, but please take a look at it. It's free. It should take you less than, probably 5 minutes to complete. And if you're interested in what the results are telling you, you want a deeper diagnostic, a deeper audit by our team, then you can contact us and we'd be happy to walk through our services with you.
Absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes across Spotify, YouTube, Substack, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for your time, Marlena.
Thank you.
To our listeners, if you're struggling, and if you're struggling in terms of growth, you're looking for advice on especially these three areas, I'm sure Marlena and Lubna and their team does a lot more than that. We've covered only those three layers. But if you're interested to do a growth audit, especially if you see there's friction in terms of conversion, friction in terms of retention, friction in terms of your marketing narrative, your ICP, positioning, please do reach out to Marlena and her team. Again, Marlena, thank you
Definitely.
so much for your time. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Me too.